Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to my video. All right, guys. Just want to give you guys a quick fix on an issue that I had the other day. So basically, I had this issue with my car, and this came out of nowhere. Actually, the car was like driving fine for most of the day, and went to a McDonald's to get something to eat. Came out about 30 minutes later, got into my car, and tried to start it, and it was not starting at all. There was no crank. There was no. It was, but but everything else worked inside the car. I mean, I was able to, um, you know, the alarm worked. The alarm worked. Well, the remote worked. The all the lights on the dash worked. The blower motor works. Like everything worked as normal, except that it would not crank. It would not start up. It would not crank. So that was a bit of a uh, you know an annoyance, a frustration that I was dealing with, and I was like, okay, this car has been pretty good. I've had virtually no issues with it. It's driven fine. There's no check engine light. Haven't had any issues with it since I had it. And all of a sudden, this came up where, out of nowhere, out of the blue, it just would not start up. So, I was a bit annoyed by it, but I had to solve the issue. So what I did was I turned on my headlights and went out just to see how bright the headlights were, because I wanted to gauge how much charge was in the battery. Maybe the battery had maybe I need to change the battery or something. But the headlights were like super 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 bright. So at that point I was like, maybe it's not the battery, because I mean, for headlights to be that bright, there should be enough charge in the battery for me to do a slow crank. I should be hearing like some kind of crank, some kind of slow crank, but did not get any of that. So that had me scratching my head. I went back into my car, and pretty much what I did was, um, I was thinking that it could possibly be the brake switch. So what I did was, I have this little. It's called a brake lock, where it locks the brake, but it's like for security reason. But I use that to push the brakes, and then went out to see whether the brake lights were working, and the brake lights were working just fine. So I knew that it wasn't the brake switch that was the issue, which I kind of thought it was, but it wasn't. So after that, what I did was, I checked the battery, just to make sure, whether, the terminals were good, clean, etc., etc. Now, what I did notice was that the terminals were a little bit corroded. There was some white bluish stuff on there. So I had my Coke that I got from McDonald's, poured the Coke on the terminals, and had some napkins to clean it up. Now, the terminals were not super super tight. They were tight enough that I don't think that was the issue with it. So it was tight enough. I took the terminals off, poured some Coke on it, cleaned it with napkins, popped it back in, and for sure I thought that would actually fix the issue. Try to start it, it would not crank. Same situation, would not crank, would not start. So outside of that, I was like, okay, let's check the ground wire. The main ground wire, if you guys don't know, is the negative cable. Normally, it hooks up to the frame of the car. So I was looking at the ground wire just to see whether there was any kind of just to see whether it was corroded, disconnected, rusted, or anything like that. There was a little bit of rust, but nothing that I thought would affect the electricity going to the battery to the car. So I was able to rule out that. So at that point I was like, let me rule out the battery completely, because I'm not wasn't 100% sure whether it was the batteries that was the problem. So I had somebody help me out with a jump. Had the cables on there for a good couple minutes, maybe like a minute, and then try to crank it. Normally, it should crank at least a little, with it hooked up, and it did not crank at all. So because it didn't crank at all, I knew 100% that it was in the battery. At that point, I ruled out the battery, the ground wire, and I also ruled out the alternator being the issue. Because normally, if the alternator wasn't charging the battery and the battery is completely dead, the test for the alternator is if you put wires to the terminals, it should jump the alternator and then have and then it should at least crank up. And once you take the cables off, the car would die. So at that point, I could rule out the alternator. I could rule out all those things at that point. So basically, what I did was I got back to my car and I'm like, I was still hoping that there was a really simple fix to the problem. So basically at that point, I was thinking to myself, okay, I have an OBD2 reader, a $19 OBD2 reader that I got from Walmart. And seeing as how there's no check engine lights on the dash, I thought to myself, I mean, there's a chance that it could possibly be something, but that might bring a code up that's pending, that's not in the system. So what I did was I hooked the OBD2 up and made sure that it actually went through and scanned the whole entire ECU, which it did. It scanned the whole entire ECU. No codes popped up, no pending codes, nothing at all. And at that point, I was ruling, as many things out as I could. And at that point, I ruled that out. Okay, so after that, I was thinking to myself, there's a couple other things it could be. It could possibly be the fuses or the relays. All right, so I got to the box where the fuses and relays are and checked out all the fuses just to make sure that there were no blown fuses or anything like that. And checked out to see whether there was any kind of brownish tint on any of the top of the fuses. There was none. Didn't smell anything that was burnt. And then I recalled that there were two situations where I've experienced where the fuses caused my car not to start, and this was cars that I've had previously. One of those situations was the car that I had, there was no power at all to the car, nothing was on, etc., etc. And in that situation, it turned out to be the main fuse that was blown. It was the main fuse that was blown. But once I swapped that out, it actually fixed everything. But that's not this situation here, because I was getting power to everything else except it wouldn't crank. It wouldn't start, it wouldn't crank. So that was in the situation. The other situation where where there was a fuse issue that caused no start was the car would crank but it wouldn't turn over. It would crank but it wouldn't turn over, and that fuse turned out to be either the CPU, the fuse to the CPU, or the fuse to the fuel pump. Now that unfortunately wasn't the quick fix for this car, because there's no cranking. This car is not cranking. It's not cranking at all. So that wasn't the problem. At that point, I was thinking to myself, all right, we've eliminated a lot of things. Let's go with the next most obvious thing, which is the relays. And I actually thought it may have been a relay that would be causing the issue. So basically what I did was I swapped out one of the relays for the other relay and try to start the car up. And unfortunately, it wasn't an easy fix because it didn't start up. It was the same situation. It would not crank, would not start. And at that point, I knew that it wasn't the relay that was the cause of this issue. So basically, at that point, I thought to myself, okay, it was probably a couple of things. Could be the key fob or the starter. Now, I didn't think it was the starter because I had the starter changed up about a year and a half ago. Kind of pretty much had the same, all the same symptoms that I had with this situation, but seeing as how the starter was a year and a half ago that was changed out, and probably put in maybe like 15,000 miles on the car. It wasn't the first thing that popped up, and it wasn't the second thing that popped up. It was, so I pretty much eliminated to the starter, had the car towed back to my house, and once I got there, I redid all the I pretty much redid all the went through everything, the fuses, the relays again, double checked the battery, charged it up overnight, etc., etc. None of that was the issue. So at that point, I thought it was, it was probably the starter. So I got to the starter and did a direct jolt to it, where I actually put the positive of the battery, got another wire, put a positive of the battery to the, and try to jump the starter, and the starter was completely dead, would not jump. At that point, I knew like 99% was the starter. Took it out, went to AutoZone, had them tested it, and it was definitely the starter that was the problem. And because the starter was warranted had a lifetime warranty on it, got another free starter, popped it in, and it worked. And it's been working ever since. So if you guys are stuck in this situation where you guys are looking for a fix for it, there's a good chance that probably one of the things that I went through in this video could possibly fix your situation. Hopefully it's not the starter where you're stranded until you get the starter changed up. Anyway, if this has helped you guys out anyway, please leave give me a positive feedback. Please subscribe. Please comment if you guys have any comment on this video. All right, guys, take care.